They claimed I killed him. Then I read the letter that he left for me. My name is Brooke. I used to be the girl who smiled at everyone, even when they didn't smile back. I believed people were good deep down, but that was before they accused me of murder. I lived in a quiet part of town, in a small estate called Harper Ridge. It wasn't fancy, just rows of old brown houses and mailbox flags that barely stood straight anymore. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew Peter. Peter was my best friend. We grew up together, from building tree forts out of old wood to walking to the same high school. He was the only person who really saw me. Not just the way I looked or how I dressed, but the real me. The one who stayed up at night, dreaming about starting a bakery, who sang into wooden spoons like microphones, who cried when her mom left and never came back. Peter always stayed. But 2 weeks after his 22nd birthday, they said I killed him. It started the morning I found his front door wide open. Peter never left his door open, not even when he went to get mail. I had gone to bring him a lemon pie I baked the night before. I knocked once, then twice. No answer. So I stepped in. At first, everything looked normal. His couch, his jacket on the hook, the soft hum of the fridge. But something felt wrong, like the room was holding its breath. Then I saw his shoes in the hallway. One upright, one sideways. And Peter, lying just beyond the kitchen. I screamed so hard my throat burned. My pie dish crashed to the floor, splattering lemon filling on the wall. I ran to him. He wasn't moving. His eyes stared at the ceiling. Empty, cold. I don't remember calling 911. I don't remember the ambulance. But I do remember the looks. The paramedics whispered. The neighbors peeked from windows. The police asked too many questions. Over and over. What time did you arrive? Did you fight recently? Were you ever romantically involved? They pulled me in for questioning. I was still wearing my slippers. When they found out Peter had rewritten his will 2 days before, leaving me everything, they didn't even try to hide their suspicion. She had motive, someone said. She was always hanging around him, another muttered. But she's just the quiet girl. A lady tried to defend me. No, someone else said. She's the one who killed him. Peter's funeral was the worst day of my life, not just because I had to bury the only person who believed in me, but because his family wouldn't even let me sit in the front. They whispered. They glared. They pulled his little niece away when she tried to hold my hand. I stood at the back, next to the tree where Peter once carved a crooked heart with our initials. His sister Natalie wore black lace and blood-red lipstick. She stood at the podium and said, "My brother never deserved what happened to him. He trusted too easily." And she looked right at me. The police couldn't prove anything. The coroner ruled it a heart attack. But Natalie didn't stop. She told people I poisoned him. She told his college friends I'd tricked him into changing the will. She told her followers on social media that I was dangerous, that I should be watched, that Peter had probably been trying to cut me off before I did it. My bakery dream died in the ashes of that rumor. No one bought my pies anymore. No one stopped to chat. No one called. Except one person. 3 months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. It was sealed with blue wax, the kind Peter used on Christmas cards. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a folded piece of paper, in Peter's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means they think you did it. But you didn't. And what I'm about to tell you might be the most dangerous truth of all. My breath caught. He knew. I ran inside, locked the door, and read the rest of the letter under the light of a single lamp. Peter had been scared. Not of me, of Natalie. He wrote about how she'd gotten into trouble with some people in California, something about money laundering, and how she needed to disappear. Fast. Peter had agreed to help her clean up her mess, until he found out she was stealing from their parents. He said he'd told her he was going to confess to the police. She threatened him. He thought she wouldn't go through with it. He ended the letter with, "If anything happens to me, Brooke, I trust only you to make it right. Burn this letter after reading." But I didn't burn it. I hid it. And in that moment, I felt something stronger than grief, stronger than fear. I felt the fire of revenge crackling in my chest. They claimed I killed him, but now I knew the truth. And I was going to make her pay. Not by yelling, Not by fighting, but by showing the world who Natalie really was. One step at a time, one secret at a time, one crack in her perfect red-lipped smile at a time. I started by going to the storage unit where Peter used to keep his files. The key had been taped to the back of the letter. Inside, I found an old brown box marked college projects. But under the projects were flash drives, folders, notes, things Natalie would kill to keep hidden. I took them all. As I stepped out into the cold Harper Ridge air, I didn't see the shadow watching me from across the street. A camera clicked. The next morning, someone slipped a photo under my door. It was me, standing in front of Peter's storage unit. And on the back, in red ink, was one word: run. I didn't run. I stood at my window, holding the photo with shaking hands, wondering who had taken it. Who knew I had Peter's key? Who knew I was getting close? Natalie. It had to be her. She was trying to scare me, push me into silence. But the letter, the files, the lies she told, it was all too much now. I couldn't let her win. I waited until nightfall before opening the box again. This time, I carefully looked through everything. Peter had kept records, phone calls, emails, even screenshots. One folder was labeled Natalie. Do not open. I opened it. Inside were emails between Natalie and someone named Brian. She was begging him to move some money for her. Offshore accounts. Quick transactions. She used phrases like "they're watching," and "I need this gone before he finds out." She'd signed off with an alias, Nina Sterling. I printed it all out. This was no longer a suspicion. This was proof. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. They already thought I was crazy. Obsessed, jealous. I needed someone who would listen. So I called the only person who hadn't shut the door on me. Mr. Halverson. He was Peter's old college professor. A kind older man who used to call us the Pie Kids, because Peter always brought him slices from my bakery. He answered after the third ring. Brooke? His voice was cautious. I need to show you something, I said. It's about Peter. There was a long pause. Then he said, come early. Before my wife wakes up. I packed the folder, the letter, and one of the flash drives into a bag and left before sunrise. Mr. Halverson lived in the quieter part of Harper Ridge, past the grocery store and the old train tracks. His porch light was on when I arrived. He made tea while I laid everything on his dining table. By the time I finished explaining, his hands were clenched into fists. I always knew Natalie was hiding something, he muttered. Peter said she had secrets. She has more than that, I whispered. She has a motive. We agreed to keep everything quiet for now. He said he'd look through the files and help me organize them into a timeline. Something clean. Something the police couldn't ignore. When I left his house, I felt lighter. Like Peter was with me again, helping me, smiling that lopsided smile. But that peace didn't last long. Later that night, I returned to my apartment to find my door open. Again, my heart stopped. I tiptoed inside, gripping my keys like a weapon. The lights were off, but I could hear something. A slow, rhythmic creak, like a chair rocking. My hands were shaking. I flipped on the light. The place was empty. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, except the photo, the one that had been slipped under my door. It was gone. So was Peter's letter. Whoever had been inside my apartment knew exactly what to take. My chest tightened. I ran to the kitchen drawer and checked my second hiding spot, under the silverware tray, taped to the bottom of the drawer. The flash drive was still there. Whoever it was, they hadn't found everything. But they were getting closer. I called Mr. Halverson. No answer. I called again. Still no answer. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak made me jump. Every gust of wind made me check the window locks again. The next morning, I drove to his house. His mailbox was open. His front door was cracked. And the porch light was still on, just like it was when I arrived the day before. I stepped inside, calling his name. There was a note on the kitchen table, written in block letters. Drop this or the next letter will be your obituary. I stumbled back, my breath catching. This was no longer about revenge. This was a war. And they were playing dirty, but they didn't know me. They didn't know what I was capable of. I wasn't the quiet bakery girl anymore. I was the girl with nothing left to lose. And I was going to make Natalie pay. Every single step. But first, I had to find out who Brian was. I took the flash drive and went to the university library, where Peter and I used to hang out after class. I logged into one of the old computers and opened the files. Buried deep in a folder named June's Statements was a video. I clicked play. Peter sat in his room, looking pale and tired. If you're watching this, it means Natalie got to me. She won't stop. Not even if it means hurting Brooke. She's working with Brian Reyes. He used to be her boyfriend, but now he's more like her partner in crime. They're laundering through an old startup front. They think no one knows, but I've been tracking the transactions. It's all there. Brooke, please, don't let her win. You're smarter than her. You're kinder. That's why she hates you. My hands covered my mouth. Brian Reyes. I finally had a name. I searched it online. He had a LinkedIn profile. A photo of him smiling in a business suit. He lived just one town over. Worked at a place called Westwood Consulting. I stared at his face for a long time. I was going to meet him, soon. But before that, I needed more eyes. So I did something I never thought I would do. I made a fake profile, and joined the Facebook group called Justice for Peter. Natalie had started it. It was full of lies. Posts calling me a snake, a killer, a manipulator. But now, I was inside her camp, watching, waiting, planning. The first thing I did was message one of the admins, pretending to be someone new in town who wanted to help. They added me right away. Then I got a DM, from Natalie herself. Glad to have you on board. Let me know if you ever see that witch around. I smiled. She had no idea I was already in her house, and I was going to burn it down from the inside. But later that night, something happened I didn't expect. I heard knocking, loud, aggressive, sharp. I looked through the peephole. No one, just an envelope on the floor. Inside was a photo of me and Mr. Halverson, talking over tea. And this time, the back of the photo didn't say RN. It said, "You're next." I didn't scream. I just stared at the photo in my shaking hands. Me and Mr. Halverson, sitting by the window, completely unaware we were being watched. The angle looked like it was taken through the trees. Someone had been right outside his house, watching us, planning. The words on the back of the photo made my skin crawl. "You're next." I sat on the floor for a long time, the photo in one hand, the flash drive in the other. My breathing was shallow. My heart felt like it had been pushed into my throat. Then something inside me snapped. They wanted me scared. I wasn't giving them that. I picked up my phone and dialed the one person I had avoided since the whole thing started. Detective Mason. He had led Peter's case. He had looked me in the eye and told me I was too emotional. I was about to remind him that being emotional didn't mean being stupid. He didn't answer. I left a message. "This is Brooke Miller. I know you think I'm crazy, but I have something you'll want to see. If anything happens to me, check the USB taped under the third desk at the Harper Ridge Library." I hung up. If they were watching me, I wanted them to know they wouldn't win. The next day, I drove to Westwood Consulting, Brian Reyes' workplace. I sat across the street in a coffee shop with a clear view of the parking lot. At 4:15, he came out, tall, confident, smirking as he talked on the phone, and slipped into a sleek black car. I followed him, not too close, just enough to see where he went. He drove past the edge of town, then pulled into a gated estate, one I'd never heard of before. The sign read, Marrow Glen. Of course. A place like that doesn't show up on Google Maps. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the way in the dark. The gate was automatic, but a delivery van drove in, and I slipped behind it before the gate closed. Marrow Glen was quiet. Too quiet. Every house looked perfect. Manicured lawns, fancy cars, no people outside. I found Brian's house easily. His car was in the driveway, lights on upstairs. I stayed in the shadows and watched. I saw him on the phone again, pacing in the room above the garage. I pulled out my camera and zoomed in, snapped 3 photos. Then I backed away, careful not to step on any twigs. As I turned to leave, I nearly tripped over something. It was a bag. just lying on the grass near the bushes, like someone had dropped it in a hurry. I picked it up. Inside was a wig, and a pair of black gloves, both covered in dirt, and something red. I dropped it like it burned me. This wasn't just about fraud anymore. They were hiding something much, much worse. I backed out of the estate, breath tight in my chest. When I got home, I pulled out the folder and started building a timeline. Peter's voice echoed in my head from the video. Don't let her win. I added Brian's photos, the email records, the threats, and I started writing everything down. I wasn't going to wait for a detective. If they didn't believe me, I'd bring the truth to the people myself. I wrote a full report, every detail. I posted it on a private subreddit, under a throwaway account. Title: They claimed I killed him. Here's what really happened. Within hours, I got responses. People asking questions, offering to help. One said they knew a reporter. Another asked if I could share more files. It was working. Natalie's lies were cracking. Then around midnight, someone replied with a single sentence. You missed something in the email headers. I didn't understand. I messaged them privately. They showed me how to check the full data from the emails Natalie sent to Brian. The hidden codes, the IP addresses. One of them didn't match. It wasn't from Natalie. It was from someone pretending to be her. A third player. A name showed up in the coding. Zach. That name hit me hard. Zach wasn't just anyone. He was Peter's old best friend. The one who vanished right after the funeral. The one who had been arrested once before for identity theft. And suddenly everything got worse. Much worse, because now it wasn't just Natalie and Brian. There was someone else in the shadows. Someone who knew how to disappear. Someone who knew how to copy and lie and erase things from systems. I barely had time to process that before the power in my apartment went out. All at once. Lights. Heat. Phone. Everything. I stood frozen, then ran to the door to lock it. Too late. Someone had already jammed something into the lock. The knob wouldn't turn. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and backed into the hallway. I didn't know what to do. Then I heard footsteps. Heavy, measured, coming up the stairs. I turned off the flashlight and held my breath. They stopped outside my door. Silence. Then a voice. Calm, smooth, almost familiar. Brooke, let's not make this hard. I froze. It was Zach. His voice was older, rougher, but it was him. I just want to talk, he said. I stayed quiet. He chuckled. I always told Peter you were too smart for your own good. I felt sick. I backed into my bedroom and locked that door too, even though it wouldn't hold long. I slipped the flash drive into my boot and grabbed my phone. No power meant no Wi-Fi, but the old landline Peter made me keep just in case. It still worked. I dialed 911. Emergency services. What's your code? I need help, I whispered. Someone broke into my apartment. I think they want to kill me. What's your address? I gave it. They said they were sending a unit. I hung up. Then I heard the sound of my front door being kicked open. Wood cracking. Zach was in. I sat in the dark, shaking, waiting. Then something shattered in the living room. He was looking for me. I crawled under the bed, holding my breath, praying. The bedroom door creaked open. I heard his boots step inside. I squeezed my eyes shut. But then, sirens. Outside. Close. Zach cursed. I heard him run. By the time the police broke in, he was gone. But he'd left something behind. A note, taped to my mirror. You can't hide forever. I stared at the note. The letters were written in all caps. Jagged. Uneven. Like they were scrawled in a hurry. You can't hide forever. The police arrived minutes later. But by then, Zach was long gone. They searched the apartment, but found nothing more than the broken door and a couple of scratched-up furniture pieces. The officer who was leading the search, Detective Klein, raised an eyebrow as he stepped over the broken pieces of my door frame. You're sure he was here? He asked. His voice was calm, almost too calm, like he wasn't convinced. I heard him. He left a note. I said, holding it up. This isn't just about me. It's about something bigger. He said my name. Zach was friends with Peter. Peter's dead. And Zach, he's been involved in everything. The fraud, the lies, the cover-up. It all leads back to him. Detective Klein looked at the note, then at me. We'll need to take this in for evidence. You should stay somewhere safe tonight, Brooke. This could get dangerous. I nodded, but in my head, I was already thinking of the next move. This wasn't just about hiding anymore. This was war. The detective left, but I didn't stay put. I couldn't. I had to find Zach. I had to finish what I started. I packed a bag, grabbed the flash drive again, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I didn't have time to feel scared. The adrenaline coursing through my veins was stronger than fear. I needed answers. I had one lead left. Brian's house. I'd been keeping track of his movements. But now that I knew about Zach, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was connected. If Zach was the mastermind, then Brian was just his puppet. Or maybe he was worse. Either way, I wasn't about to let him get away with it. I waited until the middle of the night before driving back to Marrow Glen. The gates were shut, but I knew how to get past them. I'd been careful to watch the delivery van last time, making sure I knew the exact timing. This time, I wasn't slipping in unnoticed. I drove straight up the winding road and parked across from Brian's estate, hidden in the shadows. I watched his house for a while, hoping to catch a glimpse of him, to see if he was home. But nothing. No movement. Not even a light on. I grabbed my phone and texted Detective Mason again, hoping he would come through this time. I explained the connection with Zach, how he was involved in Peter's death, how he was the one pulling the strings. Mason texted back almost immediately. I'll meet you tomorrow. We'll figure this out. Tomorrow. I couldn't wait that long. I had to do this myself. I waited in the shadows until I saw Brian's car finally pull into the driveway, headlights cutting through the night. He got out quickly, glancing around before heading into the house. I didn't waste any time. I moved closer, crossing the driveway. When he disappeared inside, I was careful not to make a sound. The door was locked, but I had learned the code a long time ago. I had learned a lot of things when I'd been watching. The door clicked open. I crept inside, moving silently through the hallway, the dark corners of the house swallowing me up. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a clue, maybe evidence, but I knew I had to find something. Anything that would tie Brian to the mess that had ruined my life. I went upstairs, checking each room as I went. I passed the living room, no lights on. The kitchen, empty. Then I stopped at the door to the study. I pushed it open. Brian's desk sat in the middle of the room. His laptop was open, papers scattered across the top. The air smelled like coffee, and something else, something faint, but familiar. I leaned closer. There it was. A file, a folder with my name on it. I pulled it out slowly, the weight of it making my heart race. Inside were pages of documents, each one worse than the last. There were pictures of me, from weeks ago, from months ago. Me at the coffee shop, me walking to my car, me leaving Peter's funeral. Someone had been watching me for a long time. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking, and then I saw it. A receipt, for a plane ticket, to somewhere far away, not just anywhere. Zach's location. I slammed the folder shut. The room spun. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about everything. Brian wasn't just involved. He was deep in it. He was the one who had been feeding information to Zach. The plane ticket was proof of that. Before I could process what I had just uncovered, I heard the sound of footsteps, heavy ones. I turned quickly, but it was too late. Brian was standing in the doorway, his face frozen in shock. "Brooke," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I stood there holding the folder in my hands, waiting for him to make the next move. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. The sound of the door creaking behind me made me freeze. Then I heard the voice. "Why don't you leave her alone, Brian?" Zach's voice came from the darkness. I turned. There he was, standing in the doorway, just like Brian. But this time I wasn't backing down. I clenched my fists, ready to face them both. It was time for the truth to come out. And when it did, it was going to be the end of them. I stood frozen, facing both Brian and Zach. The tension in the room was thick, like you could cut it with a knife. Zach had a smug smile on his face, like he knew something I didn't. Brian looked scared, genuinely scared, his hand hovering near the door frame, as if he was trying to figure out what to do next. Zach, I said, my voice steady but full of anger. I know everything. The plane ticket, the pictures, the connections between you and Brian. This ends tonight. Zach's smile didn't falter, but I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He stepped into the room slowly, his hands in his pockets, as if this was just another casual encounter. You think you know everything, Brooke. Zach's voice was smooth, but there was a hard edge to it. You don't know half of it. You never did. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. I know enough. You and Brian were behind it all. Peter's death, the fraud, everything. You two have been pulling the strings, and I'm going to make sure you both pay for it. Brian shifted, looking nervous. He looked from Zach to me, then back again, like he was trying to figure out which side he was on. Brooke, you don't understand, Brian said, his voice trembling. Zach, he's not who you think he is. This was all for something bigger. You think I was involved. You think I helped him. I didn't have a choice. He had leverage over me. I didn't trust Brian. Not one bit. But before I could respond, Zach laughed. A low, cold laugh that sent a chill down my spine. Oh, poor Brian. Always the victim, huh? You're pathetic. Zach sneered. But let's be honest here. Brooke, you think you're the one holding all the cards, don't you? You think you have it all figured out. The truth is, you've been walking around with blinders on this whole time. You have no idea who's really behind all of this. I felt my blood run cold. What do you mean? Zach stepped closer, his smile growing. I'm not the only one with secrets, Brooke. You really think Peter's death was just some accident? Think again. There's a lot more to it. And you're too deep in it now. You'll never get out. My mind raced. What was he talking about? I thought I had pieced everything together. But this was something new. Something I wasn't ready for. You're lying. I spat. This has nothing to do with Peter's death. It was you. It was all you. Zach raised an eyebrow. Unfazed. Was it though? I think you need to start questioning everything you know. Because you're about to find out what really happened. The tension in the room reached a boiling point. I could feel my heart beating in my throat. Each word from Zach sending a shockwave through my body. My mind was spinning, trying to process everything. Brian glanced nervously at Zach. It was clear now. Brian wasn't just guilty of helping Zach. He was terrified of him. But before I could say anything more, the door to the study burst open. Detective Mason stormed in, gun drawn. Freeze. Zach's face turned from smug confidence to a look of surprise. And for a split second, I thought I saw real fear flash across his face. But it was gone as quickly as it came. He recovered instantly. What is this, Mason? Zach asked coolly. You're really going to stand in my way now? Mason didn't hesitate. I've been investigating this whole operation for months. All the pieces are coming together. You and Brian have been running a major scam. And I'm shutting it down tonight. I stood frozen, watching it all unfold. The truth was finally coming to light. Everything I'd been working for, everything I'd been risking, was paying off. But even in that moment of victory, I knew the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. Zach's eyes narrowed. You think this is over, Mason? You think you can just take me down? Mason's grip tightened on the gun. Don't make me shoot, Zach. It's not worth it. I stepped forward. Zach, you're not getting away with this. You'll be behind bars where you belong. Zach's smile returned. But this time, it wasn't confident. It was almost a smirk of disbelief. You really think that, Brooke? You really think this is going to end like you want it to? You've only just begun to scratch the surface. He turned quickly, making a break for the door. Detective Mason aimed, but I shouted, don't let him escape. Before anyone could react, Zach dashed through the open door, bolting into the night. After him, Mason shouted, but I was already running after him, not thinking twice. I didn't care if it was dangerous. I wasn't going to let him get away. I heard Mason calling for backup, but I wasn't going to wait. Not for him, not for anyone. This was my fight now, and I wasn't about to lose. I chased Zach through the yard, over the bushes, through the darkened streets. My heart was racing, my breath coming in ragged gasps. But I wasn't slowing down. I couldn't. Then as I rounded a corner, I caught a glimpse of him. Zach just ahead. I lunged, grabbing for his jacket, but he twisted out of my grasp, pushing me to the ground. "Not so fast, Brooke," he sneered, his voice dripping with malice. But that's when I heard the sirens. And then out of nowhere, Mason appeared, his back up close behind. Zach froze, his face twisted in panic, as he realized he was cornered. "You're done, Zach," Mason said, stepping forward with a smug grin on his face. But as they handcuffed Zach, something inside me clicked. The pieces were finally falling into place. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own life again. I had won, but I knew it wasn't over yet. Zach was hauled into the back of the police car, his eyes locked onto mine, with an expression that was equal parts fury and disbelief. I watched as the officers slammed the door shut, but his glare didn't break. He was seething, and I could feel his hatred radiating across the street. I stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, trying to process everything that had just happened. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, but there was a lingering sense of unease. I had caught Zach, and I had done it with my own hands. But I knew that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Detective Mason walked up to me, his face a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. "You did good, Brooke. We finally got him. You should be proud." I nodded, but the words felt empty in my mouth. "Yeah, but there's something off about all of this. I feel like there's something bigger I'm missing." Mason raised an eyebrow. "Bigger than Zach?" I turned and looked at the police car, where Zach's face was still visible through the window. His eyes were no longer defiant, but desperate, like he knew something we didn't. "I think he's hiding something," I said, my voice low. "Something that could change everything. And if I don't find out what it is, this whole thing might just come crashing down on us." Mason didn't argue. He simply nodded. "We'll get the full confession out of him. You did your part, Brooke. The rest is up to the law." But I couldn't just stand there. Not after everything. I needed answers, and I wasn't about to wait for Zach to crack under pressure. If there was one thing I had learned throughout this whole ordeal, it was that Zach wasn't the type to give up easily. He wasn't going to just confess everything and let me walk away. I pulled my phone out and called Brian's number. It rang for what felt like an eternity before he finally picked up. "Brooke?" Brian's voice was shaky, and I could tell he was still trying to process everything. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, though my voice was laced with doubt. "But you need to tell me everything, Brian. Everything you know about Zach. I don't trust him, and I need you to be honest with me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Brian taking a deep breath. "Brooke, I don't know how to explain it, but everything you think you know is just the tip of the iceberg." I frowned, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "What do you mean?" Brian hesitated before speaking again. "I can't say too much, not yet, but I'll give you something that might help. Go to the old warehouse on Summit Street. It's where we kept everything. The files, the records, the things Zach wanted to hide. If you want to understand what's really going on, that's where you'll find it." I could hear the fear in Brian's voice, but I didn't have time to question him. This was the lead I needed, the final piece of the puzzle. "I'm on my way," I said, cutting the call short. I turned to Mason, who was talking to another officer. "I need to go to Summit Street," I said, my voice urgent. "Can you come with me?" Mason looked at me, his face serious. "It's risky. You don't know what's in that warehouse. Are you sure you want to do this?" I nodded firmly. "I need to know the truth. And if there's a chance that Zach is hiding something, I'm going to find it." Mason sighed but didn't protest. "All right. But we'll take a team. We'll cover all bases." Within minutes, we were in a police cruiser, heading toward Summit Street. The sun had long since set, and the streets were dimly lit by the occasional streetlight. The eerie quietness of the night only added to the tension in the air. When we arrived at the warehouse, the place was exactly as I remembered it, old, abandoned, and forgotten by time. The building was surrounded by overgrown grass and weeds, its windows shattered and boarded up. It looked like no one had been there in years, but I knew that wasn't true. Zach had been here. I could feel it. Mason gave a signal to his team, and they started to fan out, searching the area. I felt a chill run down my spine as we approached the heavy metal door at the front of the warehouse. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. Mason pushed the door open, and the creaking sound echoed through the empty space. The warehouse smelled of dust and rust, and the faint glow of moonlight filtered in through the broken windows. I stepped inside cautiously, my eyes scanning the dimly lit interior. "Stay close," Mason muttered, his flashlight sweeping across the shadows. We moved deeper into the warehouse, the sound of our footsteps the only thing breaking the silence. It didn't take long before we found a set of stairs leading down to a basement level. Without hesitation, I descended, my breath catching in my throat. Every instinct told me something was wrong. Something was waiting for us down there. When we reached the bottom, the sight that greeted me made my stomach churn. The room was filled with boxes, hundreds of them. Some were stacked neatly, while others had been thrown in disarray. But what stood out were the files scattered across the floor. They were marked with names, dates, figures. Zach was keeping records. I whispered almost to myself. Mason moved toward the nearest box and opened it. Inside were stacks of documents, each one more incriminating than the last. But it was the final box that caught my attention. It was sealed with a red wax stamp. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling as I pulled out the contents. A letter. The letter was addressed to me. The handwriting was unmistakable. Zach's, and the words on the page made my blood run cold. "You think you've won, Brooke, but you've only just begun to realize what's at stake. I'm not the one you should be afraid of." I dropped the letter, my mind reeling. What did he mean by that? What had I missed? Then from behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. I turned around in horror, but it was too late. I spun around, my heart racing as the footsteps grew louder. The air felt thick, like something heavy was about to fall. I expected to see one of the officers from Mason's team, but what I saw stopped me in my tracks. Standing in the doorway was a man I hadn't expected to see. Brian. His face was grim, his hands held up in surrender. "Brooke," he said softly, his voice tinged with regret. "I didn't want you to find out like this, but I didn't have a choice." I took a step back, my mind struggling to process the sight of him here, in the basement of the very place I thought would hold all the answers. "What are you doing here, Brian? You're supposed to be helping me, not—" He lowered his gaze as if ashamed, and then met my eyes with a look of helplessness. "I didn't have a choice, Brooke. They threatened me. If I didn't help them, they'd come after you. After your family. You have no idea what they're capable of." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Who, Brian? Who's they?" Brian hesitated, then spoke the words that shattered everything I thought I knew. "It's not just Zach. It's bigger than that. It's the whole network. The people who've been controlling everything from the shadows. Zach was just their pawn, and now you've played right into their hands. I was just trying to protect you." My mind spun, trying to connect the dots, but it was too much. I didn't want to believe what Brian was saying, but the fear in his eyes told me he was telling the truth. Everything that had happened, all the lies, the betrayals, it had all been part of a much larger plan. The letter in my hand felt heavier now. The words Zach had written suddenly made sense. I wasn't the one in control anymore. Whoever had been pulling the strings behind Zach was the real threat. I looked at Brian, the weight of the situation sinking in. "So what now? What do we do?" Brian took a deep breath, his eyes flickering with a mix of resolve and fear. "We end it. We expose them."
"But you have to trust me, Brooke."
"This goes way beyond you and me. It's about the safety of everyone you care about." Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall again, this time much closer. We weren't alone anymore. The air seemed to tighten, and my instincts told me it was only a matter of time before they found us. "We have to go," Brian urged, his voice panicked. Now, before I could react, he grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the back door. The warehouse had become a trap, and I knew we had to escape before we were cornered. We rushed through the dark, damp corridors, but every step felt like it brought us closer to danger. As we reached the exit, a shadow blocked our path. My heart stopped. It was Detective Mason, but he wasn't alone. Behind him were two men I didn't recognize, both wearing dark suits and serious expressions. "Mason?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What's going on?" Mason's eyes were cold, his face hard. "I'm sorry, Brooke, but it's over." Brian stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached for the gun tucked into his waistband. You don't have to do this, Mason. You're not part of this. You're not one of them. Mason's lips curled into a bitter smile. You really thought you could stop this, didn't you? This was never about Zach. This was always about keeping the power, about keeping control. And now it's time for you to understand that no one escapes this web. Brian raised the gun slightly, his face taut with fear and anger. You've been working for them, haven't you? All this time, you were just another piece in the game. Mason's eyes flickered for just a moment, but the moment was enough. Before anyone could move, the two men with him lunged forward, knocking the gun from Brian's hand. He stumbled back, but I wasn't about to let them win. I acted on instinct. Grabbing the metal pipe from the floor beside me, I swung it with all the force I had, catching one of the men in the side. He grunted and fell, but the second man was already advancing on me. I ducked as he reached for me, the adrenaline flooding my veins as I threw myself at him, knocking him to the ground. Mason looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and admiration. You've got guts, I'll give you that, but his words were hollow. The fight was far from over, and it felt like the walls were closing in. I heard sirens in the distance. The sound was growing louder. Let's go, I shouted at Brian, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the exit. We don't have much time. We made a run for it, bursting through the back door, just as the first police cars pulled up outside the warehouse. I didn't know how much time we had, but I knew one thing: this fight wasn't over. Not yet. As we ran into the darkness, I looked back at the warehouse, the place that had become a symbol of everything I had fought for, and I knew, deep down, that the war was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was on the right side of it. I didn't just want revenge anymore. I wanted justice, and I would make sure they would never forget that.